Hey guys, welcome back to We Met at Acme. I'm so excited to be here with Carly Joseph. Carly has a business where she helps people very kindly with the surrogacy process and to get matched with a surrogate, which is something that we need to talk more about and know more about. So thank you so much for being here. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So glad you're here. We always start with this question, which has nothing to do with surrogacy, but what is your favorite romantic gesture?
Wow, that's a great question. I love a romantic gesture. A card. Love a card.
Do you like a long-winded paragraph in a card or a short and sweet card?
Either way, but short and sweet is fine. It doesn't even have to be like an official card, like a Post-it. Not like a burger I'm breaking up with you
I was going to say.
But like
dramatic.
And I love you Post-it. It's good. Yeah.
That's really cute. Do you give what you like? Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's your favorite romantic gesture, but do you do that for others as well?
Yeah, totally. Not necessarily with my husband because he's like not a romantic gesture person, and I've had to teach him that that's important to me. But like, yes, I tend to do what I like.
I really am excited for the day, and I'm sure you are too, where like you can do that for your kids, like in their lunchbox or something.
I was just gonna say the lunchbox note. Sometimes I will do like a note like in the suitcase if my husband's traveling without me. But like
that's cute.
Yeah.
That's really cute. So how did you and your husband meet?
We were set up.
Okay. By who?
We were set up through a mutual friend who I grew up with and he went to law school with. And there's like a whole story around it because we had seen each other on the apps and he claims that I had a horrible picture of myself. So he continued to swipe left on me, even though we had met actually like years prior at the same mutual friend's birthday party. And now we like retell this story and like he'll show the picture and everyone universally agrees that it was a horrible picture of me.
Where were your friends?
I don't know.
When you were making this profile?
I feel betrayed by everyone.
No. Truly. Well, that's why I feel it's so important to get your friends' takes on your dating profile.
1000%. And also like be honest with people.
Yes, you have to.
But at the same time, like we talk about this sometimes. He's like, if you had a way better picture of yourself, like maybe you'd end up with someone else.
Well, that's true. So lucky for him, you didn't. But it is so true. I feel like I say it. I like to think tactfully when I do dating consultations. I say this picture does not properly portray how beautiful you are. You know, isn't that a good way?
That is such a good way to say
saying it's a horrible picture.
Yeah,
of
that's
you?
not how he said it to me. But that's what he meant. I thought it was okay.
That's what he meant, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were set up. And how old are you guys now?
I'm gonna be 39 tomorrow.
Okay.
And
happy birthday!
Thank you.
You totally didn't mention that's also your birthday, or maybe you did.
Well, it's not today, but it's tomorrow.
But it basically is.
It almost is. It's an afterthought, honestly, at this point. And he is 38.
Okay, so you're an Aries.
I am.
What is he?
Capricorn, I think.
And he's a year younger than you?
He's 6 months younger than me.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you don't feel like you're with a younger man.
I'm a grade older, but yeah.
But still, that kind of feels like you're, with a younger man.
Yeah, I'm an older woman.
Yeah, I feel like a year difference in age with a man is like substantial.
Like 10 years.
100%. But the opposite would be nothing.
100% agree.
Yes. I dated a younger man, a year younger. And he just we were younger. So you guys are at least at I don't know how long ago did you guys meet?
We are together almost 8 years.
Okay. So 31-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. So by then, you kind of know.
It didn't feel like a huge deal.
No.
But I did note it at the time.
Right.
Because I sort of always imagined myself with a not much older man, but older just because, I was guys are immature, but he's an old soul, I guess. And
yeah.
The 2 years, we're a grade apart, but he took a year off between a gap year before college.
Oh, so it's really 2.
So we're 2 grades. So a lot of his friends are 2 years younger.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, that feels big. But
that's big.
Now it doesn't.
Yeah, now it doesn't. I was in that relationship in my 20s. So it was a big difference.
Yes.
Every year in your 20s is a totally different life.
Yeah. I always kind of say now, 20s and early 30s makes a huge difference. But then once you're in the same life stage, the age difference is not as significant.
Totally
my
agree
youngest
with you.
sister is 8 years younger than me, which always felt huge. But now she's married and like we're both adults. And so
Right.
now I'm like, oh, we're like kind of like the same age, even though we're not.
Right. No, it's interesting. I just set up a friend of my husband's with someone who's 14 years his junior.
Wow.
Which I didn't even realize because she is so mature.
Right.
And he is so not immature, but not as mature. And I didn't even think about it. And then we were sitting in a taxi going to some event. And Steven, my husband, turns to me and he goes, you realize that when, so-and-so was 26, the girl that you set him up with was 14.
Yeah, that's like sick to think
And
about.
I was like, ugh. He was like, when we had just finished business school, she was 14. Like 26, you're like an adult. And
yeah,
when you
but
put
even
it
now,
that way,
26 sounds really young.
No. But
yes.
to a 14-year-old, you're certainly
that's
an
a
adult.
child.
Yeah.
That person can't drive a car.
I was like, should I be arrested? Like,
Yes.
this is pretty crazy, But they're probably going to get married. So in that
I
case,
love
it's
that.
fine. Are you ever jealous of friends who have older husbands? Because sometimes I am. Not like
No.
older, but like 4 to 6 years. Sometimes I'm like, that sounds nice.
No.
Like
I've never thought about it. I don't
Not
think
jealous of their relationship, of the fact that like the guy's kind of older. I can't explain it.
I
because,
guess I
like,
just feel like I know they're probably still immature.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Like the things that I think that my husband is like immature about, like I don't think they're gonna change in 6 years.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think it's more just
Sorry,
like,
babe.
I'm like, okay, your husband is 40 and my husband is 34. So like your husband's getting business opportunities potentially, right? That like other
I
like
see what
that,
you're
you
saying.
know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
It's like in that sense, I'm like, interesting. I can see the future and like I'd like to be there now, you know?
Yeah. No, I feel that. I haven't really thought about that.
I honestly don't think about it often, but when I do, I'm like, 4-year age difference is pretty, you know?
Yeah.
But I digress into what we're actually here to talk about, which is our journeys, more
Yes.
importantly, yours, that led you to your business. So you got married to your husband.
Mhm.
You are married. And then, you always wanted a family. At what point did you start family planning and trying to conceive?
We didn't really have like a plan. I mean, I felt like we got married in the fall of 2019 and we went on our honeymoon at the like Christmas of that year. So I think we were
Thank God you
just,
went
like,
before COVID.
we just got it in.
Mhm.
Like otherwise we to this day would have like never been on a honeymoon
No,
because
literally.
of everything that then happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we went on our trip and it's funny, like looking back, I was like, oh, like I'm not gonna like go off the pill till after we come back because like I want to drink and just in case I get pregnant. Because I don't know, I guess my mom always like put in my head that like, she had sex unprotected 3 times and, I have 2 sisters and, I was like, oh, I'm going to get pregnant so easily. And we started trying and I didn't even like really know what trying was. Like, I don't think I understood like ovulation until I like wanted to have a baby. And then when it wasn't happening, then I like started Googling things and like looking at all the like trying to conceive like Instagram accounts and all that kind of stuff. And it was COVID. So work was weird, like life was weird, and it became like an obsession almost in a way that I actually don't know how I would have felt about it if life was normal at that time, but it wasn't happening. I'm like a very type A person, so when it wasn't happening, I was like, okay, I want to like go get testing done and see what's happening. And it had been like probably 6 months or so. So that summer, that first like COVID summer, we went to see my OB and we had a consult with a fertility doctor and we decided to start IVF. And it kind of like wasn't clear what was going on. And the doctor was like, yeah, do IVF. Like, and one of the things that the doctor said at the time, which is something I always share with people, is that like IVF is a very diagnostic thing to go through. It's not like, oh, like this is what's going on with you, do IVF, it will definitely work. It was like, do IVF and we'll like kind of learn more about what's happening and about your eggs and about the fertilization and what's going on. But in my head, I was like, we're going to do a round of IVF and we're going to get pregnant. And like, I was already sort of like planning for the next thing. Bless you.
Sorry, I never sneezed during this. Yeah.
And it did not go well. I don't remember like what happened exactly that first round in terms of like how many eggs and whatever, but we sent like 4 or 5 embryos for testing. And I just remember feeling so anxious because they had told us, like, you're going to have drop off, at every single stage. And then we got one good embryo out of that first round. And so that was kind of like the beginning of the entire saga of you think it's going to go one way and it's not going to happen that way.
Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily have to share where you were doing IVF, but were you happy with the clinic or the hospital?
Yeah, no, we started actually, we were living upstate in like the Hudson Valley at my husband's country house because of COVID. So we started with a really small clinic up there. We were totally happy with the care there. We actually connected with this clinic because our wedding planner's sister was one of the IVF nurses there. It was like a very weird small world. That one good embryo is my daughter. That's the first embryo I ever made. So we knew we wanted to have many kids. So we wanted to bank embryos, but we had good results there.
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately we felt like we wanted a second opinion. We felt like maybe it was a little bit more complicated than we had first thought when we set out to do this. So once COVID settled a little bit, we did start going to the city and we went to CCRM and we were very happy with our care there.
So back up. So you get this embryo.
Yeah.
And then what?
And then the doctor was like, well, we recommend having 3 embryos before you want to plan for a live birth. So we didn't want to just transfer that embryo and then kind of have to start all over. So I was like, okay, why don't we do another round until we have 2 or 3 and then we'll do a transfer. So then we ended up going to another clinic, did another round, didn't make any embryos. And then at that point, the doctor was kind of looking at kind of our last retrieval round, looking at the results from that one and kind of seeing that I would get a lot of eggs, not a lot would fertilize. We would have more drop off before day 5. I don't know how, should I go into the detailed window of,
I think it'll be helpful. Yeah.
So at every stage, sort of from retrieval to fertilization to day 5 when they send for testing. And then ultimately for the testing, we just continued to lose so many. And there wasn't really a clear reason. Generally with IVF, you kind of can rule out most sperm related things because they literally pick and choose the sperm that they use. And the good ones, I think, kind of are the ones that work. And then with eggs, it's sort of well, I would get a bunch of eggs, but then some of them wouldn't fertilize. So they weren't really sure what that was about. And I didn't really have any other, I didn't have PCOS. I didn't have anything else that, I didn't know if I had endo, but no one had ever even spoken to me about it. And I didn't even know what it was. Mm-hmm. And so then the doctor started talking about endo and she was like, well, maybe you have it. And I was like, how would I know if I had it? Are there symptoms? And she was like, well, you're not getting pregnant. That could be a symptom.
And can you just, if you know offhand, define endometriosis for our listeners?
Yeah, I'm not going to give a great medical explanation, but it's essentially endometrial tissue that should be growing in the uterus that grows elsewhere, inside the pelvic area. So I ended up having it. I had surgery to remove it. I'm now fast forwarding a bit, but it was on my ovaries. It was on my colon. It was kind of everywhere. And IVF hormones make it worse. Mm-hmm. So sometimes people have lower back pain, really painful periods.
Yeah, which are signs of endometriosis.
Which are symptoms, but some people have none. Mm-hmm. And the other complicating thing is
Did you have symptoms before this?
No mm-hmm. symptoms. But the other complicating thing is that tons of women with endo get pregnant without a problem.
Right.
So it's sort of
same thing with PCOS.
Yeah. Do you get aggressive and do anything about it? Confusing. Can you do anything about it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. I imagine similar with PCOS, it affects others. It doesn't affect everyone the same.
Exactly.
So for my PCOS, I don't think that I could get pregnant on my own. I think I could get pregnant. Obviously, I had a baby, but not on my own because I don't ovulate. I don't get a period.
Right.
So for your endometriosis, let's say, and obviously you know better than me, but just assuming that it manifested in a way that blocked whatever you were trying, I imagine, or something.
Yeah, I guess. And I don't even know well enough to properly explain it, but I think because of where it was inside my body, maybe because it was on my ovaries, it was impacting the egg quality. Like it was sort of like affecting the eggs as they were released so that they weren't fertilizing properly, they weren't developing properly, that kind of thing. But that was the only symptom I had at that point.
So your daughter's embryo on ice, you do other rounds, you don't get any embryos. And then what?
The next one, we didn't get any. The one after that, we just kept going. Like the thought process at that point was we need to bank embryos before we do any transfers so that if a transfer doesn't work, we have more and we're not like then first. Like, I guess I was thinking about it as in terms of like, if you then spend a month doing a transfer and it doesn't work, it's just more time. I'm only getting older. Like, I should do the retrievals while I can.
I think that's really smart because also I doubt you were thinking this at that point, but you also need embryos for a surrogate.
Correct.
And for other options down the line, whatever they might be.
Yes,
so
but we definitely were not thinking about that at that point.
But it was good that you continued doing, rounds.
Although we like didn't really bank any. Like we continued. I only made one embryo per round, if that. So by the time we got to like March of 2020, and that sticks out in my mind because I was waiting to get a COVID vaccine before I did a transfer. So I got the vaccine and then I did a transfer and I had a chemical pregnancy. And we were kind of back at square one. We had like one or two more embryos at that point. But then it was the same thing. Like we kind of want at least 3. What if the next one doesn't work?
And just to explain again for our listeners, a chemical pregnancy is when it reads positive, but it doesn't actually take.
So a chemical pregnancy, I don't know the exact definition, but like most chemical pregnancies are like you have a late period, but then you don't have a positive pregnancy test kind of thing. So like a very early pregnancy that like resolves itself through technically a miscarriage, but it's like not considered a real
right
miscarriage
because it's so early. So like for example, if you're not doing IVF, if you are just a person who can get pregnant on their own, you can have a positive pregnancy test and then like get your period 2 weeks later.
Exactly. Or maybe your period is like a couple days late and then it's not even a positive pregnancy test, or it's a positive and then it's a negative. In my case, it was you do a beta, which is a blood test at like a week. It's like 10 days after the transfer. And my beta was good. It was positive. It was pretty high. And then the next beta was the same. And they wanted to double.
And so for people listening that don't have, that are just like, getting pregnant naturally and all that, you could also not know at all that you've had a chemical pregnancy, which is something to note. Okay, so continue.
So we did that transfer, had the chemical pregnancy, and my doctor was kind of like, everyone is allowed a failed transfer. Let's just try again. Like, you do have another embryo or 2. Let's see what happens. So we did another one the next month, and it didn't even take.
So then what?
So then that was 2 failed transfers. The next thought was kind of like, so that brings us to like summer 2021, 2020. She was kind of like, I think at this point, let's talk more about endo. So
also, what made you not transfer your daughter?
That was kind of like the one remaining one that we had. So she was like not the best embryo.
Okay.
Because we had made 1 or 2 more after her to bank them before I did the transfer. And then we saved her. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, she may have been initially an inconclusive embryo, which is like another result you can have from testing. And then we retested and it was good. And we were like, okay, let's like not transfer that one yet.
Yeah.
I have this all written down like in a note on my phone, but it's hard to remember top of mind. So at that point, my doctor was like, let's talk about endometriosis. Again, like you could go and have a consult for surgery, but like even if you have it, you might not need it. But I didn't really like have other options at that point other than to continue doing retrievals and like transferring embryos and hoping for the best and seeing what would happen. So I did go ahead and have the surgery. And the theory sort of with the surgery is we'll remove the endo and then you want to kind of act quickly to do another transfer because the hormones kind of exacerbate the endo. So I got the surgery and the next month and my doctor was like, let's try something different. Let's do a retrieval and do a fresh transfer right away so that there's not as many hormones and like doing a retrieval, then waiting, then preparing for a transfer cycle. So I had like my worst retrieval at that point to date where I had on day 5, one embryo that was kind of okay, and that's what they transferred fresh, and it didn't work. And because it was a fresh transfer, we didn't have any information about the embryo, if it was chromosomally normal or anything like that. And there were no other embryos remaining from that cycle.
Mm.
So that was kind of like a big like reset point for us. Like we had done a bunch of retrievals at that point. I now had 3 failed transfers. Did the endo surgery. Like it was just kind of like, now what?
And 3 failed transfers, as far as I know, but you probably know this stat better, is when doctors typically start to talk to you or float the idea about a surrogate. Is that true?
I actually don't know.
I've heard that, but maybe.
That may be true. That was not being discussed with us at that point at all. And I think maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my God, am I not going to be able to have a baby? But I was kind of like, that seems crazy. Like, of course I'm going to be able to have a baby, but this is just really hard. And at that point, we were moving to LA. So it was like a major like rock bottom point in our journey, but it was also like a good point to pause because we were moving. We knew we would have to change doctors. I didn't really want to be like, I had already, when we went to LA to look for a house, I like was doing injections like on the plane. And I was just like, we need to like take a beat.
Right.
Which also felt hard because that's just more time.
Yeah. I mean, anything that delays this kind of process is such a dramatic hit. Like it really makes you feel so defeated. How did you get your daughter on ice to LA?
Not till much later. So at that point, I guess that was the one embryo that we had in New York. And she was on ice.
She's such a fighter. I mean, she literally was just like chilling throughout this whole thing.
She was like not ready to make her entrance.
Yeah.
She was on ice in New York at our clinic in New York for a while until we like knew we wanted to do something with her. At that point, we were just sort of like, we're not doing a transfer immediately. Most fertility doctors, I don't know if people know this, it's just like an interesting thing to keep in mind, like don't want to take embryos made by other doctors, which is like a complicating factor when you change clinics. So I think some more than others are open to it eventually if you also do a retrieval with them. But I think there's some thought of like, I didn't make these embryos, so I can't like
be liable,
speak to the embryology and like understand the, percentage likelihood of it working. So we just like, we knew we were going to have to make more anyway. So we were just like, let's just leave it. It's really expensive to move them. So we didn't do anything about it until we needed to.
Okay. So you're in LA, fresh start.
Yep.
What is your game plan?
Game plan was like, oh, it's a fresh start. And everyone was like, new city, new chapter. It's all going to work. It's going to be great. We started out with a doctor there. Different approach. I did like what I think some people call mini IVF, where like, her thought was that like I wasn't getting enough good embryos because I was like getting stimulated for too long, and then like some of the eggs were like overcooked and some were not like stimulated and like grown enough for the retrieval. So she was really focused on quality over quantity, and I did 2 retrievals and still only made 1 embryo, and I did a transfer and it did not work, and that brought us all the way to like summer of 2021 or no 2022 at that point. So it was many, many months of like, we had a few false start cycles where like I would start the retrieval cycle, my lining didn't look good or my follicles didn't look good. So I was like, wow, like just, I don't know, another 6 or 8 months has gone by and like I'm still nowhere. And so at that point, so I had that failed transfer in June and my mom passed away in June.
Oh,
and
I'm so sorry.
So thank you. And so it was like a big sort of like crash down of like everything in my life that had been like, my mom had been sick for a while. IVF was not going well. And it was just kind of like that summer, I was like, I'm taking off. Like, I can't focus on this anymore.
How was your relationship during this time? I mean, mine would be not okay.
I mean, honestly,
it's really hard.
It was really hard. Thankfully, we were really good. Like, honestly, we were better than we are with kids.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that I shouldn't say mine would be not okay because my husband was so supportive during our process, but I was not okay.
I was going to say,
so it's like, it doesn't matter how supportive he was. Like, I would just need to lash out.
To be clear, I was not okay.
Yeah.
Our relationship was actually in a very good place at that point, and he was really supportive. And, you know, we were like in a new city, like we have a whole new life. My mom was dying. We're trying to have a kid. Like everything was like kind of fucked. And we were really solid and like holding each other together, honestly, but I was unwell.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know.
And so at what point do you start to talk surrogacy?
So I think like that August, so like 2 months after my mom died, after the transfer didn't work, we went and sat with our doctor, like in her office. It was the first like non-clinical appointment, I guess, that we'd ever had. And we were like, where do we go from here? Like we've had, at that point I had done 7 retrievals. I had done 4 transfers that didn't work. And I was just sort of like, I'm not done, but I can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result without a clear answer or idea as to why or what we can do different, because I feel like I could go on doing this for years.
Yeah.
And I didn't go to that meeting thinking, should we talk about surrogacy? Should we talk about adoption? Should we talk about an egg donor, which we didn't really need, or a sperm donor? But I was like, we need to talk about something. And she said, I think it's time for you to start thinking about different options, but I don't think you need to be done trying. Like, you can do both. And that felt actually so freeing to me, because I think I went into that meeting thinking it's got to be one or the other. And so we left that appointment with a game plan of like, let's start exploring surrogacy and like gathering information. And then let's think about me doing another retrieval, and we can kind of like see where it all nets out. And so that was sort of our starting point.
And feel free to share whatever you feel comfortable with. But at this point, 7 retrievals deep, you know, 4 transfers, financially, how the hell are we doing this? Because like, I think about one transfer and I'm like, that's a hit for me. Were you getting support from your families? Were you like, you know, just a very successful couple? Like, for people listening who are like, can I even get to that point financially? You know what I'm saying? And then be able to consider doing both at the same time. Like, I'm thinking like, you know, someone has to be really cushioned in order to make these decisions, because it's really hard on people.
Yeah, no, it's really hard. I'm really glad you asked about that, because I think part of like what I'm trying to do now in my business and talking about this and sitting here with you today here is like talking about what this actually looks like in real life. And I don't think people talk about it enough. For us, luckily, initially when we started out with this, like our clinics did take insurance. And so we were able to like get through a couple retrievals and cycles on our own with insurance support. And that was not without like many hours spent on the phone begging insurance companies to like pay for the shit that they're actually supposed to pay for.
Yeah.
But ultimately it became completely unaffordable, and we were fortunate to have support from our families, which we were very lucky for. And that is like the number one thing that my husband and I sort of talk about with each other. And when I talk to other people about our journey, is just that like, we're so lucky that we had this as an option. Like, many people would sit in the doctor's office and think about surrogacy and start these conversations with attorneys and agencies and hear these prices and just be like, well, this is not a choice for us. And like, if we were in a different family situation, financial situation, like we wouldn't have been able to do it. And so we were really fortunate to have that help. And it is brutal and excruciatingly expensive.
It's beyond. And so you're now deciding, okay, we're going to keep trying and look into surrogacy.
Yeah. So we started by talking to an attorney, which I think a lot of people have misconceptions about how attorneys sort of play into this process, because people think that you need to wait to see where your surrogate is, like what state they live in, to get a lawyer. But that's not true. You should generally have a lawyer that represents you and does your contracts, and then potentially you may need other local counsel to help. But that was actually like the most helpful conversation that we had, because when we were starting out, we were literally like, what happens if she wants to keep the baby? And like that doesn't really happen anymore. And things like that. Like we were starting at the very beginning of like, what does this look like? What can we expect? What is it going to cost? What should we be thinking about? And that was such a helpful first step for us.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess just like tell us your journey to having your children.
Yeah. So at that point, it was like end of summer, early fall of 2021. We did a little bit of research on a couple agencies that the doctor recommended. We spoke to the lawyer. We decided ultimately to work with a concierge service, which is the same thing that I'm now doing. And so she helped us match with our surrogates pretty quickly. We had our first match call was with Tori, our surrogate who carried my son. And we matched with her. I want to say it was like October. So we had a Zoom with her and her boyfriend. And it was like a weird first date, kind of like at the end of the call. We're like, we want to work with you. Like, do you want to work with us? And she was like, yeah. And then we were like, can we like exchange phone numbers? And we were like kind of off to the races. And that felt like a huge relief, because even though we were still so far, it's like from when you matched to when you do a transfer, it could be 6 to 8 months. So we knew we were far from like getting pregnant, but it felt like an option towards a pregnancy that was actually going to work. And it was a very similar feeling to the beginning of IVF, where I was like, oh, we're going to do this and it's going to work. And so like, that's how I felt with her. I was like, you're going to get us this baby that we want. And at that point we really only had, I think like 2 good embryos. So it like was still very risky. And so we decided to like, while she was going through the legal process and we were getting her medically cleared and all that kind of stuff, to do another retrieval. At that point, we also decided to try a new clinic. And honestly, we didn't do anything that different. I think my doctor would, if she was in this conversation, would say like it's completely random. But in my 8th retrieval, I made 9 embryos healthy tested, which was more than I had in 8 or 7 prior retrievals combined.
That's amazing.
Which was like, she called me laughing and she was like, I'm sure it's not wrong, but you're going to think I'm wrong.
Yeah,
But these are the results.
It's wild.
It was wild. And like looking back, I'm kind of like, I feel like the universe knew that like we were going to work with surrogates, because we needed like a little bit more room, a little like we needed more embryos to play with kind of. And that was just so freeing, because I was like, okay, now like I mean, it still felt very precious, but it didn't feel like the stakes were not as high doing a transfer. So, and at that point, we were preparing for a transfer with my surrogate.
And your son came from that batch?
He did, yeah.
Okay.
So my daughter is younger. She was born 17 weeks after him, but she was made much earlier than he was. So I'm like, maybe she's older, kind of. So yeah, we were like approaching the transfer with my surrogate. And she was like part of that excitement too. Like we told her about the embryos and she was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then we decided to use an embryo from that batch just because we thought they were like slightly better quality, even though I was older when we made them. And we went ahead and did a first transfer to her in April of 23. And she got pregnant. And everything was great. And we saw a heartbeat. And then at the 9-week appointment, or it was between 8 and 9 weeks, so with surrogacy, I'm probably skipping ahead and I can go through these details, but like she did some appointments at our clinic and some locally. She lived in Vegas. And so we were like on the phone with her waiting to hear about this appointment. And she was like, I'm just waiting in the room. Like the tech is here. And then she was like waiting for the doctor. Like texting us, and I guess we weren't on the phone yet. And then she texted being like, can I call you guys? And there was no heartbeat. And I just like, in that waiting period of like 3 minutes, I was like, we were sitting at the table and I said to my husband, like, this is not good. And he was like, babe, calm down. Like, she's just waiting. And I was like, no, I feel it. Something is not right. So she had a miscarriage and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, we're working with a surrogate that's supposed to like solve the issues here. And how is this possibly happening? So she had a D&C and like had to recover from having a miscarriage, and we were recovering, and it was so complicated. But we started over and tried again a couple months later, and the same thing happened, except a little bit earlier. It was a 5 or 6 week miscarriage. So at that point, we were just sort of like, okay, now we've like really tried everything. And once we started working with her, the idea of me doing a transfer, like, I guess I still wanted the experience of being pregnant, but it like felt like a lot to take on at that point. So I kind of put a pin in it. And then once we had the 2 miscarriages, we were like, okay, now we really need to kind of start over. And we didn't know if she was going to be willing to do a 3rd transfer. She had been through so much with us already, and like she was healing and grieving, and we were healing and grieving, and like for different reasons and in different ways. And so ultimately we like, you know, each kind of like took some time to recover and think about what we wanted to do. And we were just kind of like, let's do everything. Let's like go ahead. If she wants to do a 3rd transfer, let's also find another surrogate in case it doesn't work. And let's go back to trying to get me pregnant and see what happens. So we matched with another surrogate. We started the whole process with her. Her name's Crystal. And while we were waiting, again, there's like, you know, this big gap before you actually like go ahead and get started. During that time, we went ahead and did a 3rd transfer to Tori. And that was last Thanksgiving, or not Thanksgiving 2023. And she got pregnant again. That's never been the issue. So it was like at the transfer, I wasn't even nervous because I was like, of course she's going to get pregnant. She always gets pregnant. And it worked. I mean, she stayed pregnant all the way up until we were ready to do a transfer to our 2nd surrogate. 3rd
time's the charm.
Exactly. And in May, we were getting ready to do the transfer to Crystal. And our fertility doctor, actually, she had the same situation where she had a surrogate after not being able to get pregnant. And when the surrogate was like 5 months pregnant, she found out she was pregnant. So she also has kids who are like 5 months apart. And she was the only person in my life who was like, are you really sure you want to do this? Like, it's not really a good idea. Like, it's going to be really hard. And I was like, yeah, even my husband was like, I don't know, maybe we should wait. Like, this seems crazy. And I was just like, even if we have this one kid, like we're going to be talking about doing this again, like immediately when he's born, because we want to have more than one kid. We're not getting younger. It takes a while to get started. So we did the transfer to Crystal. The kids were meant to be 5.5 months apart. She got pregnant. Everything finally last summer was like working. Everything's great. My son was born in August. And then in November, Crystal called. She was 29 weeks pregnant. And was like, I'm going to the hospital. Like, I'm noticing some fluid, but I'm not sure, like, what's going on. I just want to be extra. She was, like, so on top of it. And she got to the hospital and called us, like, an hour later. And the doctor was on the phone and was like, Crystal's, she had a thing called PPROM, which is, like, premature rupture of the membranes. It's kind of like your water breaks early. And she was like, she's leaking amniotic fluid, so she will not be going home. So she was 29 weeks. She lived in the hospital for 5 weeks. And the doctor was basically like, there's a 70% chance that she will go into labor in the next 10 days. Or maybe it was like 50 to 70% chance, but like majority chance, which was very scary to think about having a 29-weeker baby with a 3-4-month-old baby at home at that time.
Right.
And she will have to stay in the hospital. And if the baby stays inside, we will induce her at 34 weeks. So luckily, that's what ended up happening. She was induced. So my kids are 17 weeks apart to the day. But for 5 weeks, every single day, we held our breath, being like, okay, another day went by that she stayed inside, and like speaking to like neonatologists and, you know, understanding the development like issues between like a 29-weeker and a 30-weeker and a 31-weeker, and kind of like hitting every milestone. But luckily she stayed in, and now I have 2 kids and I'm tired.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, wow, what a story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Of course.
And as much as I want to just talk about your own story for so long, so many questions came in in about surrogacy in general, and I want to get to them before we have to stop.
Please.
So, like taking away IVF costs and all of that, how much is it to have a surrogate, not using like a concierge, just the surrogate in itself? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit. So there's a couple different ways to go about working with a surrogate. The most standard way is with an agency. And so the fee is sort of two parts. There's the fee that goes to the agency fee, and then there's the base compensation for the surrogate. And both of those things vary quite a bit. I would say the variation from agency to agency is a little bit less across the board, whereas like surrogate-based compensation really varies by state. So California has like the most expensive surrogates, I think, and experienced surrogates who have done this before are also much more expensive. But
so were Crystal and Tori the same price?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay.
And they were both first-time surrogates. And
why did you want a first time, or was that just like
we did want a first time because it's less expensive.
Uh-huh.
We were, looking for ways to make this a little bit more manageable. It's interesting now in my work, I see kind of both sides of the equation. Like I have a lot of people who, financially want to keep things in check and are like, I only want to work with a first time surrogate because it's much less expensive. And then other people who are much more risk averse and feel like working with an experienced surrogate kind of shows that like they have a proven uterus, not just with their own genetic material, but carrying for someone else, and they know what to expect going through the process. But an agency I spoke with recently actually made a really great point that I think that I've been sharing with clients, which is that like there's something really special about working with a first-time surrogate because you're both going through the process together for the very first time. And like I definitely felt that with Crystal and Tori, and it was really, really nice.
But a surrogate, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm talking to friends who are in the process right now, can't be a surrogate unless they've had a child before.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And that's just obviously proof of concept.
Correct. And that's all like, according to like your clinic, your fertility clinic would like medically clear them for surrogacy. So they would need to look at their prior deliveries and like all of the history and details of those deliveries. I'm sure, people match with surrogates independently or work with family or friends. And so like, that's like a little bit more of a gray area that I personally don't really like deal with. But with agencies and like fertility clinics doing the medical clearance, yes, they have to have.
It's so interesting because it's like, how can you become a surrogate if you haven't had a kid? But you can't. But like, then how do you start and become one? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like the chicken and the egg. And let's just say that, money is a really big issue for you. You have no family help and you're not getting pregnant. You can't even afford to do IVF, like, because that could potentially end up costing more than a surrogate or whatever it is. Like, what would you do in that situation? Like, ask a friend to have a baby and then take care of it? You know what I mean? It's like, what's the least cost situation for someone in that place?
It's a really good question. I mean, I don't have the answer, frankly. Yes, definitely. You could ask a friend. You could ask a family member. We had a really good friend offer to be a surrogate for us, which was like one of the most touching gestures that anyone has honestly ever made. And I mean, people, I know of other people that have worked with family and friends for that reason. There are also, I'm not so familiar with the exact specifics, but there are two organizations that provide grants for people in financial need who want to explore surrogacy or even IVF and don't have the means to do so. So Baby Quest and then Stardust Fertility. And so there are resources for financial aid for that. But yeah, it's a huge issue. It is heartbreaking to me that is the reason that so many people can't have their families when for others it's so easy.
Yeah. How much control over a surrogate's lifestyle do you have?
So it's a great question. Some and none, I guess, is the answer. And I say that because at the end of the day, a surrogate is another human being living their life. And, there is no true compliance or control over what they ultimately do and the decisions that they make. And because of that, you know, something I always say is that finding someone you trust and who you feel you have like alignment and understanding with, without like, regardless of what's on the paper of the contract and what you like agree to, it doesn't really matter. But like, is this a person that you feel like is going to do the right thing, is going to keep your baby safe, is going to make decisions that you feel good about? That is like the most control that you have. And it's not really control. It's trust more than anything. You know, everyone approaches this stuff differently. And there are people who, you know, want to pay for organic food and make sure that their surrogate is eating certain things and try to exert some control that way. And that works really well for some people and some surrogates and some intended parents. For me personally, like, we wanted someone who was going to keep the baby safe and going to do what the doctor said and like that we felt a trust with, but I didn't necessarily care to exert that much effort. And I think there was a sense of like surrender of like, I can't control what this person does and they're not me. So they're not going to necessarily do all the same things that I would do. And there was something very liberating about thinking about it that way. I'm not saying that that was always easy. And our surrogates were amazing and so trustworthy and, you know, took really, really good care of our babies while they were pregnant. And I think ultimately that's all that matters.
I think even if you are someone who wants to do the organic food thing and like get a meal plan for like,
Right.
they're still gonna eat what the fuck they want when you're not looking. Like, it is what it is.
Right.
I think your version is the best, is the one that I would want to do. What is something, and I know we have to wrap up, so this will be probably the last one. I think it's a good one to end on. What is something that you wish people knew about surrogacy?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, and it's kind of an expansion on what I was just saying, that like ultimately you can't work with a surrogate and expect to have full control over how another human being lives their life, makes decisions, and ultimately carries your baby. Like, they are not you. They are not really an extension of you. And it is a financial transaction at the end of the day. And there is a legal contract around it. But there is something that in this that like is a leap of faith and like a huge sense of trust. And a lot of times I hear clients say, you know, it's the biggest decision of my life. I want to make sure this person is going to do exactly what I want them to do. And like, that is virtually impossible.
Yeah.
And I think letting go of that is ultimately like the key to a good relationship with a surrogate and having your healthy baby.
I actually have one more question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you watch Kardashians, but Khloe had mentioned that, you know, she did a surrogate with her second child and that she felt less of a connection to her child since she wasn't the one who gave birth to it. And I'm wondering if you felt that way or if you've experienced people through the process that you've helped feel that way, and if there's any kind of, I don't know, if there's anything that someone should know that might be doing this around that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a major character flaw on my part, but I don't watch the Kardashians or any reality
Oh my God,
TV.
no, I think it's the opposite.
Don't judge me. Does she have a child who she gave birth to
yes,
also?
Yeah,
so
her first
like
one.
People ask me about this. I don't know any different.
Right,
I never gave birth.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like I only know what it feels like to have a baby, watching them be delivered and then like taking them home. And I feel incredibly connected to both of them for all the good and bad ways that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I don't have anything to compare it to. In some ways, I imagine it would be harder if I had something to compare it to.
Maybe that's what it is. It's like when you do a VBAC and have a C-section.
Exactly. And like, it's even having two kids. Like I had a kid and then I had another kid 17 weeks later. And like, of course, I'm just like, well, she's fussier than him. And my pediatrician was like, why are you comparing them? They're two different babies. And I'm like, oh, right. I think in terms of how to feel more connected, there are a bunch of different things. And like, this is something that I talk to clients about a lot in my business in terms of like when they find a match and then ultimately what the journey looks like later on is like, what can you do to prepare for having a baby that like might not feel as natural when you're not pregnant and in the delivery room and preparing for the delivery and things like that. I think for me, like, it was such a rude awakening to come home and have a baby when like the day before we were like, doing whatever the fuck we wanted and
Right,
like had no
right. That's
responsibilities. And then
crazy.
we were like,
Mhm.
shit, like this is happening. So I think there are kind of ways to force yourself to like slow down and think about like the change that is coming that like maybe I did not put into practice and wish I
Right.
had.
Mhm.
Also with our second surrogate, we had a doula in the room, which kind of sounds silly maybe to some people. Like to me, when we were planning, I was like, I don't know if it's necessary, but our surrogate is a doula, was training to be a doula, and so she really wanted her to be there. And she was so amazing in like helping us connect to the birth process. And
Mhm.
like when Mia, my daughter, was born, she was like about to come out, and the doula was like, okay, I'm gonna like put your hands on her and I want you to talk to her. And you know, otherwise it's kind of awkward because you're kind of standing around this woman
Right,
who's
right.
laboring and delivering, and you're like, okay, this is my kid. Like when
Mhm.
my son was born, I was like, can we touch him? Like, is that okay? I don't know. Like it's weird. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of little things like that, you know, you can think about or someone can help you think about doing to make the process feel a little more connected
Yeah.
and wholesome. And yeah.
This has been so interesting. Like, I feel like if I were not even close to this process, I would still be really interested in everything that you shared and just learning more about surrogacy. I just have always been so curious about it. So, thank you so much for coming on. Where can everyone find you and possibly use your concierge service?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to talk about it. I have a website. It's carlypjoseph.com. I'm on Instagram at carlypjoseph, and you can reach out to me there. And I'd love to help anyone who's interested in working with a surrogate. And, you know, one thing I always say when I talk about what I do now is even if you don't want to work with me or you're not ready to explore surrogacy, I'd love to educate people on it and explain the different ways to sort of approach this process. So please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Carly.
Thanks for having me.